Welcome, everybody, to another edition of This Week in Legal Blogging presented by LexBlog. This is Bob Ambrogi, and this is, I think, our sixth episode of this now. We've had a great lineup of prominent and accomplished legal bloggers that we've talked to over the last few weeks. You can find all of these recordings at youtube.com/LexBlog if you want to go back and listen to them. And today I am very happy to have as my guest Stuart Kaplow. Stuart is an environmental and sustainability attorney in Maryland, and he is the author of the Green Building Law Update, a widely read and highly respected blog on environmental law. Stuart, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is my pleasure.
Yeah, well, it's good to talk. We met all of 15 minutes ago or so. So this is really the first time we're getting to talk. So it's always a pleasure. It's always fun to get and meet some of the people who I've seen virtually for a long time, and now it's a little closer to an actual physical meeting, I guess. But it's great to finally meet you. How have you been doing? How have you been staying sane during all this time? How's it going for you?
Well, no, thank you for asking. These are obviously interesting times, and I'm grateful in all candor. We're okay, fine. I personally have been doing okay, and our law business has been doing well. So all is good down here in Maryland.
Well, that's good. Stuart, we're going to talk about your blog a whole lot, we hope. But before we do that, why don't you just tell me a little bit about your practice and what you do?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I like to think of myself as an environmental attorney. I started out a number of years ago, probably slightly more focused on green building law, and the green building law really was a marketing opportunity, a tag to then look at it a little broader in terms of sustainability law, and then really now in its broadest sense, environmental law. When we were chatting before we went online, we mentioned that I've been mentioned in an ABA journal article some years ago, and depending upon how one views that article, they somewhat tongue-in-cheek questioned the fact that I was the only green building lawyer they knew of in the country, and it was either going to go very well for me or very badly.
Well, I was going to ask, because you started, if I've got this right from looking at your LinkedIn profile and your bio, you started your law firm around 1992, and I think you were practicing a few years before that, but that would have been really in the very early days of anybody even talking about green building law, right? I mean, that was a new concept at that time.
No, you are correct. I had been at large law firms and had done environmental law and went out and began to do green building law with a very small group. I would argue we created green building and sustainability law, and it did not exist prior to that time. And it was at the time, and even is today, really a true niche practice. And in some weird way, it's lent itself perfectly to what ultimately became an opportunity to do blogging, because it really was almost a niche within a niche of a practice.
Yeah. And one more question before we get to talking about your blog, but I was curious how the time we are in right now has kind of affected the green building industry or the real estate industry more broadly, when people are suddenly talking about maybe not even returning to their offices, let alone building new buildings or whatever else. What have you seen in terms of your own practice?
No, I think it's a great observation. We have been very lucky. I mean, our quarterly billings for last quarter were very respectable and above what they were last year for the quarter. But I think that there is a tremendous amount of volatility, obviously, in the market. As much as I can tell you what they were last quarter, I wouldn't even begin to suggest to you what they might be in the current quarter. I see a lot of the legal side of real estate and the legal side of environmental law almost at polar opposites. Some parts of that law business are doing quite well, and some parts of it are doing poorly. It's a tough market. Again, we've been very lucky in that many of our clients are larger business clients, and they've continued to move forward. As much as it's unclear what the future may hold for traditional law offices and traditional offices in general, there's still an awful lot of built environment out there, and there are environmental issues associated with it. So again, I wouldn't presume to take out my magic 8-ball and predict the future, except that right now it's been doing surprisingly well. I admit I'm pleasantly pleased that we've really not only not seen any drop off, but are actually ahead year to date.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. And I said that was going to be the last question before I asked you about the blog, but you just got me curious if you could. What exactly is green building law? What is the nature of the practice? What are you doing in that area?
Right, a great question, and it's interesting when I got into this in the
it's actually a stupid question on my part, but
no, not at all. When I got into this in the 1990s, and I did my first pitch about green building law to a real estate development client, the owner of the company actually looked at me and said, "So you want me to paint all my buildings green?" So no. Fortunately, that's not all that we do. It really is a variety of environmentally sustainable practices associated with real estate. So many of those things that involve using less resources, using less energy, water quality, indoor air quality, less waste. All of those things have come together to encompass what sort of modern building law is. I could spend many hours giving you sort of a history of maybe sustainable building, but most of this really grew out of the late 1970s, early 1980s environmental movement, and folks being concerned about the impact that the built environment had not only on the greater planet, but also on the inhabitants, the occupants inside the buildings. So.
Yeah, and what are the legal issues around that? How is that a legal issue as opposed to, I don't know, an architectural issue or an engineering issue? Or
well, it's an interesting confluence of all of that, of architectural and engineering. But I hate to sound crass about this, but among the most expensive things an individual does is buy the home that they live in, and among the most expensive things that a business does is occupy or buy the space that it occupies. So issues around that building, and if you want a green building, you're a dentist, you're a journalist. It's unlikely that you're going to know how to specify, construct, and otherwise erect a green building. So in simplest form, someone's got to put together those words to be able to describe what green building is, then articulate it in a set of contract documents so maybe an architect or an engineer could design it, then so a construction company can build it, and then so it can be occupied by tenants. So in simplest form, there's legal work all along the ordinary stretch of sort of the real estate side of, at least of the environmental.
Yeah. So in the past episodes so far of this program, as I mentioned, I think we've done 5 so far. The people I've talked to, I've asked them all how they started their blog. You've got a little bit different story. You didn't start your blog, you kind of adopted it or inherited it, I guess. How did that come about?
Yeah, no, worse than that. And I say this unabashedly. I bought it. I was doing green building law, and I looked around for how to promote the practice. And again, I was concerned that I might be the only green building lawyer for a long time. So I looked around and I found this blog thing. And I'll be candid, I had not considered a blog for myself at that time. And there was this great young lawyer, Chris Cheatham, who had started this blog and was one of the earlier bloggers on Lex Blog. And I reached out to Chris, and we actually met at a convention, and we talked, became friends. And some months later, I called them up and said, "Chris, that blog thing, any chance you want to sell it to me?" I was literally doing a paper newsletter at the time, mailing 80-some copies that I was printing at a local print shop and mailing first-class mail to folks. So unabashedly, he was looking at doing some other things. He really wasn't, his heart and soul wasn't in being a green building attorney. He really was much more of a marketer. He enjoyed the blogging much more than I think the green building. So he sold me his blog, and I called the very nice folks at Lex Blog and said, hi, I bought this blog. How do we go about doing that? And there was this little pause on the other end of the phone, and I don't think anybody had ever bought a blog before.
Yeah, I've got a couple I'll sell you if you're in the market.
But it was a wonderful opportunity to take someone's existing wonderful work product. He had done a lot of great work. He was and certainly an early innovator in this space. So again, I have to admit, I bought somebody else's wonderful work product and just took off from it.
Well, I mean, one advantage to that, I can think of a couple of advantages to that, but one advantage to that is you've got a readership from the get-go, right?
Exactly. He had an existing and, interestingly enough, a very well-respected readership. I mean, he had some of the real industry leaders in environmental law were reading his blog. So it was, and it was very interesting. He was a little concerned that he's a true devotee. He is a true environmentalist. He believes. And I'm a business person, and I gear and target our work toward our business clients that have environmental issues and green building issues. And he was a little concerned about turning the blog over to me. And if someone really wants to go back and read his last post, it was a little tongue-in-cheek as he sort of went, well, we're going to see how this goes, with a very different voice.
Well, I did go back and read his last post where he was actually extremely kind to you. He described you as the godfather of green building law. And he's, quote, the only attorney I know that has figured out how to make a living from green building law. So he seemed to feel he was leaving it in good hands.
Well, again, I mean, those were certainly very kind words from him. But again, I guess what I would take away from that is that even back then, as I did this, my goal of blogging was to try to develop a market, both among lawyers, but then against the broader environmental community. Because again, I had this fear, and you might have sort of the backstory of what you're reading there is he also was a little concerned that I might be the only green building lawyer, and that might not have worked long term.
Yeah. The other thing, he wrote his last post, and then you wrote your first post. And this was in 2013. In your first post, you wrote, "In admission, I have never blogged. This is all new to me. As I find my voice on this blog, please cut me a little slack." So did the readers cut you a little slack? Did you need that slack? How long did it take you to kind of get into the routine, find your voice?
Well, let me say this. I mean, I come to this in a very different place than you do, Bob. I have no journalism or writing background. Interestingly enough, in the 6th grade, I was the editor of my school newspaper. But I peaked in 6th grade, and I don't know that I ever did journalism after that until I wrote this blog. So I think what folks found about the blog was that I communicated valuable information to the industry. We're in very controversial times in science, and we were back then also. And we weren't really talking about junk science. We didn't use that phrase at the time, but there was an awful lot of science fiction, is how we refer to it. So I tried to write good stuff while I tried to promote green building law and green building generally.
Yeah.
And folks cut me a little slack.
Yeah. And who are those folks? I mean, who is your audience? Who are you orienting this blog to?
No, and that also is sort of, I would say, a great question about, blogging and something that, interestingly enough, when I decided to do that, I read some of the materials on the Lex Blog website at the time. And, this is long ago. So I really did try to identify a target and write to the target. And the target really are two different groups of people, which is a little tricky to thread the needle through both, but really are the general counsels of the Fortune 1000 companies. So there's larger businesses in America that are going to have an environmental issue that may not be something that their usual attorneys handle. And then at the same time, the environmental world, that sort of greater industrial environmental complex of folks that are interested in green building. And I tried to address both of them as best I could, and often failed miserably. But that was those really were that was the two different audiences I tried to write to over the years.
So it's both the industry. It's an industry blog and a blog kind of devoted to I won't say lawyers who practice in the area, but lawyers who need to know about the practice in the area.
It is an embarrassing number of my referrals are other law firms that may have a green building issue or a sustainability issue in their practice, and because again this really is a small niche. Even some of the largest law firms in the country don't have anybody on staff that does that, and they reach out to us and retain me either, sometimes as a consultant, sometimes bring us in as co-counsel, but a surprising number of amount of the work that we've done over the years has really been for other law firms.
And to what extent do you credit the blog with helping to bring in some or all of that work?
Well, I know the folks at LuxBlog, either appreciate or laugh at the fact that I unabashedly acknowledge that the blog has been our number one source of new clients, nearly, if not every year since I started blogging. It really has been an amazing vehicle, and I wish I could take a lot of credit for the setup and how all the search engine optimization all works and the work that is done behind the scenes, because I know none of that and do none of that. But it is our number one. Yesterday I was on a Zoom call with a multinational business based in India that has a regulatory issue in the United States, and they found me from a blog post I'd written. And they Googled, found the blog, and reached out to us. And look, a small law firm outside of Baltimore would not be doing work for a large corporation in Chennai, but for the blog. And again, the same thing this morning. This morning, literally, I did a Skype call this morning with the counsel of a manufacturing facility in Great Britain that is having to fast-pace some manufacturing related to some COVID products here in the United States. But again, the fact that a manufacturing company in Bath found a lawyer in a small firm north of Baltimore, I don't know any other way that kind of stuff happens other than through blogs and the medium that exists around them.
Yeah, and are you formally kind of tracking that in any way in terms of how those clients are coming into your firm and what the sources are that's bringing them in?
No, we do. All new. We have sort of some standard questions we ask folks as I talk to new folks, and we do track. And look, there's no question our number one source is the blog. Our number two source are actually referrals from existing clients. And while that's very I'm pleased that our existing clients make referrals. That number is far below the number of folks that we get from the blog.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So I don't know. Well, how big is your firm? Is it just you, or are there other lawyers in the firm?
Yeah, again, it's sort of the modern world that we live in. I've referred to it for years as distributive practice. I market myself as a solo practitioner, but there's absolutely no way that I could do all the work that we do. We contract with subject matter experts around the country, both geographically and folks who have the particular subject matter expertise, both attorneys and non-attorneys. So on any given day, we might be handling projects in a dozen or so states, and very often, using an attorney on the ground in those states. So while I operate as a solo practitioner, the nature of our operation is really significantly larger than that, and allows us to grow when the market requires, and allows us to contract or otherwise pivot when it's appropriate.
Yeah. And what about the blog? Is that a solo practice, or do you have others helping you with that?
No, for good or for bad, the blog's me. I'm pretty religious about. I conceive by Thursday night a blog post and start writing and post every Monday morning and try to stay on a schedule of posting on Monday mornings.
So you post once a week?
I post once a week. I mean, again, it may vary on a hot day, but generally post every Monday morning.
Yeah. And how do you? So you're working that in over the weekend then? Is that what you're doing? I was going to ask how you kind of fit it into your routine between practicing law and attending to the blog and keeping up with topics in your field.
Yeah, it really, again, my goal is always to make certain that I have an identified topic by Thursday, and I get started on Thursday. In case I need to reach out to folks on Friday, gather more information, I can do that, and then I further write and edit over the weekend. The topics are generally work that we're doing. I mean, look, I make no claims about this. I tell folks all the time, if you want to write a diary, go buy a diary and write about diary in your bed at night. This is business. We write to get work. We write to advance clients' interests. We write to advance what we perceive as sort of correct thinking environmental law. And the topics that we write about tend to be things that are in the office at any given time.
Yeah. And by in the office, do you mean you're directly writing about matters that you're handling, or that they are topics that relate to clients you represent, or matters that you have?
Well, interesting. It's an interesting question, and I would say all of the above. That is, we very often write when we're looking to get a piece of work. I'll write about something that we can then point to someone that I have some expertise in the area because, gosh, I've written an article about it. But then we very often write to advance a client's perspective or point of view on a matter. We have a regular line in our engagement letter where one of the services we offer clients is we'll write an article for them. And very often we post on the blog. Sometimes it's for a particular purpose, much the way a vanity website might be up. The article might be up, sent out to a number of people, it's reproduced, otherwise used, and then comes down. Sometimes they stay on the website. But no, I hear often attorneys saying they're reluctant to write about matters that involve their clients. I'd probably tell you about a quarter of our blogs involve. I didn't choose the topic. It's some matter that the client has.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think when attorneys say that, they're saying it out of concern over possible ethical issues, because obviously you don't want to be writing in a way where you're disclosing confidences or that sort of thing. But but I'm sure that's a different story for you. You mentioned by Thursday night you want to have a topic in mind. How do you go about coming up with those topics? What's your process for just keeping up with developments in your field?
I'd like to tell you there's a method to the madness. I wish I could give you the correct answer, which I believe is I skim and read other blogs and look for the ideas. I wish I had the time to do that. I very much enjoy reading the blogs. Most of the ideas are truly matters that are in the office that we've been asked about, that otherwise are something. Even if it's not something appropriate to write about while it's ongoing, when appropriate, we'll write in a way after it's closed. But sometimes it's new regulatory matters. I mean, look, the most successful blog post I ever wrote was a blog post some years ago about a new SEC guidance document that required that all public traded companies do an analysis of the impact of climate change on their business in the next 2 years. They issued it. We wrote a blog post almost immediately on it. And I wouldn't even begin to tell you the amount of work that generated for so many years. Because again, those folks, those attorneys who do SEC work are very good at knowing matters of securities law. But when someone needs to advise their client on whether or not there's a matter of climate change, they went, where are we going to get somebody to do that?
Right.
We wrote many hundreds of those a year for years, and did a lot of work for large law firms, a lot of work directly for public companies. And it was, just a wonderful blog post. And in all fairness, that came out of a new regulation. But similarly, I would say the worst blog post I ever wrote, and the one that if I could take it back, I assure you I would take it back. I wrote a blog post a couple years ago.
There is a delete button.
No, I understand it. If you look, it's actually not on my website anymore, but with the beauty of the internet, people still find it apparently. I wrote one about solar panels on roofs, and when consumers sell their houses after having installed solar panels on their roofs, it creates quite a contractual and very often a local regulatory issue. I mean, we're putting solar panels on roofs all over the country, and folks aren't really thinking about the implications should they sell their house. And the problem with that is, I was correct. It is a huge problem in America, and there are tens of thousands of people a year who are faced with this dilemma, but they're consumers. So it's mom and pa who call and want to retain us, and I would acknowledge that that's not really my target, and I don't do people too good. So again, that blog post, to this day, that blog post generates more than half a dozen calls a week, every week. There's rarely a day goes by that we don't get a call from someone about a solar panel on roof problem. Every day.
That's interesting. I've got a couple of posts like that on my blog that were really extraneous or throwaway posts that have brought in a steady stream of inquiries that have nothing to do with anything I do. I had one like that many years ago. I have a son who has a severe peanut allergy, and I actually did a blog post once about finding legal resources relating to food allergies, and it was grew out of my own experiences. But it's not a week that goes by that I don't get somebody wanting to hire me as a food allergy lawyer. I'm not a food allergy lawyer. I did at some point buy the domain foodallergylaw.com, thinking maybe I would, but I never did.
Look, really is advising, Fortune 1000 Council when they have environmental matters, and it's an area that they want an attorney to head up the team because they're very much worried about liability, and they're very much worried. It can be a daunting task to sort of wrap your arms around all those issues. So they very often want to hire an attorney to head up that project. And again, that's our sweet spot. And it's not that we wouldn't do some other work, and we do, but.
Right, but so that goes back to that first lesson you read or were told from the LexBlog people when you started of knowing your audience and writing for your audience, right? Have there been other lessons like that you've learned over the years about blogging, about writing a blog, or about how to position it to your audience?
I think that one of the other lessons that I was taught early on that I would pass along is, this whole idea of the metrics and the whole idea of looking at numbers of subscribers you have to email, blasts of it. I'm sure that's of interest to some folks, and it may have some merit. But it bears little, if any, relationship to what we do, I would urge folks to write to their target. Again, I have folks who laugh at me all the time because we still mail. I print on paper and mail 7 blog posts a week, including to one of my largest and longstanding clients who's a self-made billionaire who is very involved in the environmental field, does a tremendous amount of work, has paid me a large sum of money to do an awful lot of work over 30 years. And he doesn't really care to read things on the screen. And I'm pleased to print and fold and put in an envelope every Monday morning a copy of the blog to him. So again, we have 7 folks who we physically do a first-class snail mail copy to. We also have a lot of businesses that we, for security reasons or others, they don't want to allow their internal newsletters don't link to the internet. So we send them a copy that we determine that, again, we physically email it to them. They put it in their internal email. And I know some of the larger architectural, engineering, and other associated firms in the country put out email newsletters that way.
Yeah.
So again, worrying about the metrics and worrying about that stuff that appears online, not all that important to me. I think, again, getting it in front of the right people.
I of course totally agree with you on that. I mean, it isn't about how many people are reading your blog. It's about who is reading your blog and whether they're the right people and the people you want to reach, and whether you're having some impact on those people in some way. That's really what it comes down to.
I couldn't agree more. When I judged this early on, I learned to my real test of a blog post and whether it was good or not, or the emails that I get from folks that let me know what they think. good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. And again, very often I'm pleased to hear from the key influencers in environmental matters in this country who every once in a while actually tell me that I get it right. But more often than not, are willing to offer some correction or advice. But that to me is the success of, that's how I can measure success.
Yeah. Did you ever get those 7 people that you printed out and mailed them to? Do you get feedback from them about it?
Oh, I definitely do. And again, as I said, one of them is actually long stand for probably 30 years, one of my largest clients. And the others also are all folks who are clients and have asked to receive it that way. The nature of, we assume everybody's on their phone or otherwise reading, constantly. And many of us are. I admit I am. But there's still a lot of folks who don't. And reaching them otherwise, to me is, it's what it takes to get that message out and to get it. Now, again, there are only 7 hard copies that we mail, so I wouldn't want you to think that this is a major under.
No, I think it's great that you do that. I think it's great that you do that.
Yeah. But we also do a lot of these in the magazine articles or certainly online periodicals and publications that folks, reach out to us. Those that are appropriate. I used to do more of those when I had more time. I used to try to do 5 a month. I had to target 5 a month.
Yeah.
So try to use the copy once I.
Yeah. Are there other ways that you're connecting with your readers, the readers who aren't your clients, and connecting directly with you? Are there other ways that you've found to kind of have that conversation with them or stay in touch with them?
There are. I mean, again, look, back when we all used to go to conventions and used to do things, the blog led to an awful lot of invitations to speak at conferences and conventions.
Right.
And I used to actually post in the blog that anybody who was attending the particular convention that was upcoming, if they would email me, I would buy them drinks. And I have met people all over this country and actually all over the world, Europe and Asia also, at conferences who I've offered to buy drinks for, who I buy drinks for. And in fact, some years ago at a U.S. Green Building Council conference in New Orleans, I unfortunately made that offer, and I had 160 some folks respond that they'd like to have drinks. And I quickly went. So I literally, and again, we ended up not being able to do it in the evening, but I literally took everybody to breakfast. We had I bought everybody coffee, in lieu of the alcoholic beverage they probably anticipated. But again, just those 160 folks all came from the blog, and that was the only place I expressed the invitation, was to readers of the blog. And while certainly at most conventions the number was far smaller than that, let me meet a lot of people at a lot of different subject matter conferences that related to what I was blogging about and the work that I was looking for. And again, just simply by putting a little tag sentence at the end of the blog offering to buy folks a drink.
Yeah. At Lex Blog, we call that beer for bloggers.
Yeah.
It's worked out great for Kevin O'Keefe. Kevin used to do the same thing. Kevin would, I think he probably still does the same thing. When he's going to a particular town, he'd put up something on his blog or even on Facebook or Twitter. There are bloggers in town who want to get together, and that did evolve into something more formal that he started presenting, staging as beer for bloggers, and it's a great event when it happens. So, so you started this, new to blogging, but you were already the godfather of your area of law practice, at least according to Chris. So, and I know you now say this has been the number one source of business for you. So, what has been the overall impact? Was it a good investment for you when you bought this blog, 7 years ago now? Is that what it was? Put the money into it. Has it been a good return on the money?
Well, my only hope is Chris is not listening, because if he is, I'm likely to have to offer him something more additional to what I originally paid. Look, again, I don't want to sort of sound too silly about this, but, beyond my wildest dreams. I maybe not appropriate for today in your audience, but I often actually describe it around here as it's been a legal acid trip. It's just wow. Just literally took off and just goes in all directions and keeps going. I mean, we did a blog post a couple of weeks ago that was one of our most successful blog posts. And, I had, a very large number of replies from clients and others. So, no, it feeds on itself as you continue to write and you continue to develop a library. So there's absolutely no question that not only was it worth truly the few dollars that I paid for it and the nominal number of dollars I pay a year to keep it posted, but the time is really the real expense is the time it takes to write a blog post every week. And I assure you, it's never, I may fight to find the time to do it, but there's never a question that I need to do it and that it's a valuable use of my time.
Yeah.
Absolutely no question. The most value, again, I have all these wonderful folks around the country who really do most of the day-to-day legal work. And they would tell you they need me writing blog posts and generating the work. They'll take care of getting the good work done.
Okay. Are we gonna see a Grateful Dead logo on your blog at some point?
Yeah.
No, that's great. I love that. Legal acid trip. So, do you think this has a lifespan? I mean, are you gonna keep slogging away at it, or do you see yourself wrapping it up at some point? Have you thought about that at all?
Let's say this. I don't know what that looks like down the road. There's no question that green building law has evolved, and certainly with the some of the unfortunateness that's coming out of the current COVID pandemic. I don't know where the environmental issues and the future of real estate side of environmental is going to go. I think it's the beauty again of us being small, and the beauty of blogging is I can pivot and change easily from week to week and keep it moving. One of the other dark secrets is about a year and a half ago, I started a second blog with Lex Blog. And literally, I was talking to someone, we had this idea, and very, very smart lawyer, and I wanted to partner with her on this project, and she said, well, how are we going to do this? And I said, I don't really know. I said, the only thing I know that has worked for getting legal work is a blog. And she looked at me and said, really, we're going to do a blog? And I went, no, we're going to write a blog about liquor license law in Maryland. Again, another niche inside of a niche. And again, embarrassing successes. It's a very different blog than the Green Building blog. It's a much smaller audience. It really is there to build credibility. But boy, does it generate business. So again, if I'm looking at the future, I don't know that I'm going to wrap up a blog. I might start another one. But again, our silly Maryland liquor license law blog. But again, if you thought green building was a niche, let me tell you, Maryland liquor license law is a small little niche also. But boy, does that work very, very well. I mean, we've got an attorney working full time as a result of that. And it's the only thing that we've done to promote, other than maybe buy a beer or two for someone, has been that blog, and it works just fine.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, if you ever do decide to hang it up, maybe you can sell your blog to the next person coming along with a practice in your area. I never even got. Maybe I can ask you real quick. I wanted to ask you about in your biography. You say that among other things, among the many things you've done with your career, you have trekked to some of the wildest real estate on the planet, from Kilimanjaro to Everest and K2. So, have you summited those?
I have, and again, it's one of those things that we, I'll go back to something I said a moment ago about, if you want to write in your diary. The blog is to get business, and one of the things I discovered early on is if you tell your clients you're going to be gone for 75 days on Everest, it's really not good for business. In particular, if you climb twice a year, and I generally have climbed twice a year now since 2005 or so. So we write very gently, and I admit I do pre-position some blogs before I leave, so folks don't realize how long I'm gone for. But no, I'm very fortunate to I spent a bunch of time in mountains, and it's something that I'm happy to always show folks photographs of and tell them about. But it really does scare clients. But I would also say that
your secret is good with us. We're not going to tell anybody.
Yeah, we won't tell anybody. It really has, again, the nature of a solo law practice is it's giving me the opportunity to twice a year to leave the country and go climb. Again, I'm very lucky to have climbed on all 7 continents and climbed all the tall mountains in the world. So been very lucky.
Yeah. Well, I hope, I assume those plans are on hold right now, but I hope you're able to pick up again soon.
They are. We have a climb scheduled for November. It's looking unlikely that we'll be able to do that.
Yeah.
But again, I'm always hopeful. Maybe the following spring. But again, the nature of this practice is it really has allowed me to leave the office for extended periods of time. And you have to, again, I'd make one last point is that, the nature of blogging, you can pre-position this stuff and others can post for you. And, you spend 57 days in rural Pakistan climbing K2. There's really not any internet access. I mean, don't fool yourself into thinking make a call, post something. Yeah.
Yeah. That was one of your clients calling just now saying, "What's this about you taking 75 days off?" You're in trouble now.
But again, it's really the beauty of sort of the modern practice of law. You can really you can travel, you can do all these things. I mean, I spent my first several years at large law firms. I don't want to say that I was chained to a desk, but I felt chained to a desk.
Yep. So blogging and has helped you get some freedom as well as success.
No, I would sort of end where we touched, or earlier on, that blogging really has been the number one source of new clients, and it generates clients. Look, it generates multiple calls a day, every day. We went to a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year answering service, so I wouldn't miss those calls because so many of them come from other time zones and other places in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great problem to have that an answering service would answer the phone 24 hours a day.
Yep. Well, I hope you continue to reach summits in your practice and in your personal life. I really appreciate your taking the time to tell us all about your blog and your career. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So we have been speaking with Stuart Kaplow, and his blog is the Green Building Law Update. We are going to be back again next week with this show, same time, same place, when our guest will be Angelo Paparelli of Seyfarth, who writes the blog Nation of Immigrators. You can find all of the past episodes of this at youtube.com/LexBlog. And on behalf of LexBlog, this is Bob Ambrogi. Thanks to Stuart for being here today, and thanks to all of you for watching and or listening. Until next time.